What's going on, you guys? Hey, super excited to be with you today. Got some great and awesome news. Super excited. Martin is going to be a new co-host on the Grind podcast. I'm super pumped and excited. We were having a great conversation this morning, and I wanted to carry it over to this podcast. And I think we're going to bring some great value to people. I just really appreciate the conversations that we have. So I'm excited to do these hopefully weekly with you, get them out by Fridays, but super pumped and excited to have you on here.
Yeah, thanks, Dillon. And I appreciate it. I'm excited. I'm pumped. Yeah, I love having conversations. Obviously, with anyone for the most part, let's be real, but to be truthful, especially when you deal with like-minded people, I love it. I love our talks, and I'm super excited about opportunities. So cool.
Yeah. So this morning we were talking a little bit about gratitude, and you had gotten into the conversation about the prodigal son.
Oh yeah.
Can you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah. So it's interesting. And not to obviously go too deep, but, when I look at gratitude, I believe it's foundational for a lot, especially when you deal with leadership. I think gratitude is the foundation that you have to have it. You got to come from a space of gratitude. But it's interesting. So when you do the study in Luke on the prodigal son, a lot of times we look at it like it's a great example of somebody that's fallen away. And then when they come back, we can use it as a template for our children, right, who have maybe fallen away. But I think when you go deeper, there's more than just that. So as an example, at the very beginning, it starts off where the son obviously wasn't happy. He wanted the dad to give him his inheritance, and he wanted it right away. So he asked the dad, "Hey, I want my inheritance." And then after a few days, he took off, right? Went to the city. He probably blew through all of his money. He probably had a ton of friends, a ton of partying. He had the whole life going on. But it was interesting because when you kind of keep going, he got to the point where when he ran out of money, his friends left. And then he got to the point where, he's basically working on a pig farm, eating the pods that fell. And at that moment, gratitude came back. And it basically was he realized that what he was making, it doesn't talk about the amount of money he was making, but whatever it wasn't enough. And then he thought back at his father's house where even his dad's servants had it better than that. So I think that's when the gratitude for him started to come back. And then ultimately he started seeing things differently. When you are grateful at what you're looking at, or when you're coming from a place of being grateful, it changes how you see things. It's like the whole saying, when you change the way you see things, the things you see change. Gratitude is a lens. So now all of a sudden, the son who was selfish, only cared about himself, now all of a sudden he's looking at it from a different perspective. He was grateful that he could go back and not just maybe be the son, but work for his dad and have better food. And the interesting piece is obviously when he came back, we know that the dad ran and met him and threw a party. But here's the interesting piece on top of that. It was weird because you had one son who was ungrateful, but he went through, the trials of life and ended up developing an attitude of gratitude. And you had a second son who kind of didn't do any of that stuff. But at the very end, the son wasn't grateful. The second son, who did nothing wrong, now wasn't grateful that his son who was lost, his brother who was lost, came back. So you had two examples of losing gratitude and getting it back, and then one not really losing it, but not really having it at the very end.
Yeah.
So it was weird. It was two brothers, two different situations. But I think that in everything you do, if you don't have gratitude, it's going to change how you see things. Therefore, it's going to change how you do things, and therefore, it's going to change what you attract to you.
Yeah. Now, how could we relate that to business?
Yeah, I think for business, really no difference, right? You could fill in the blank, but you think about business and ask yourself, whatever stage you're at, you have to be grateful. You have to be grateful that I would just say you're even in a country where you have the ability to be able to build whatever you want to build, right? We don't have maybe the obstructions that maybe some other people have. So I would say start there. Be grateful that we have the ability to be able to do that. I would also say be grateful that we have the capability to do that, right? That we're thinking, and obviously in our sound mind, that we have tools and resources today that, people didn't have 20 years ago. You got to be thankful for that, and the fact that you have an opportunity to create a product, service, or idea and get it in front of multi-millions of people. Like if you were born in a different time, you wouldn't have that opportunity. So we have an opportunity where you could be in front of hundreds of millions of people, rather quickly. So be grateful for the time that we're in as well. And I think ultimately, you can make a laundry list and start stacking them. And that's not to say that you have to, but what I would say is I would write down a couple of them and focus on them and think about them and dwell on them and meditate on them. Because whatever you focus on expands. And as long as you constantly have a heart and a posture of gratitude, you're going to find yourself on this side of goodness. Whereas on that side, you may have to go through the hard stuff like the prodigal son to be able to bring you back.
Yeah. And I think what kind of sparked this whole conversation around gratitude was just the idea of even team members and employees, and just you and I have both worked for companies under leadership, and just having gratitude even with the position that you're in and doing that unto the Lord. And I think that was kind of what sparked this whole conversation around gratitude, and it kind of led into this whole conversation. And it was just really cool and exciting to have that conversation with you. I don't remember everything that we talked about. I'm hoping that throughout this conversation, it'll come up and whatnot. But that kind of led into a little bit of how you were talking, how God created everything from nothing, and how there's nothing. And from the beginning to the end of time, he already knew that you would have Sports Box. He already knew that Crystal and I would have the salon, and he built everything from nothing, from end of time. And then you had kind of gone into a conversation about vibrations and things like that, which I wanted to touch on because I think it's so important because you were talking a little bit about quote unquote energy, but it's not new age type energy.
Nope.
And we see that in the Bible where you were talking about the woman touching Jesus's garment. So I just kind of wanted to touch on that story and kind of go down that rabbit hole of where we talked about that this morning. So you can start wherever you want, but
yeah, that I remember that was good stuff. And there's a lot there. So I want to make sure I don't miss, but it's interesting because in my Bible, it's pretty marked up, and I really try to dig in and really learn. And there's different facets of it. One of what was going on at that time, great lessons, but the Bible's so deep. So there's so many layers. And that's why I tell, especially young men when they come to me, they're like, hey, Coach, what do I read? I tell them, hey, don't worry about burning through it. You're better going deep than you are, go vertical than horizontal. Every section, you could go deep in the section and learn something that can impact your whole life than just burn in through and say, oh, I read the Bible.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But when I take the first page of my Bible, which is Genesis 1 and 2, there is so much on there. And I'm telling you, in my belief, there's if that's all you had for the most part, and you were to learn and study and dwell, you would have a very, very successful life. There's so much about business and marriage and life and friendship, and all the templates are in there. But when you were talking about God created everything, the first thing we learn about God is, not that he was love, which he is, and all that is, God teaches us about himself as his nature. He's a creator. In the beginning, God created. So the first thing God chose to reveal to us is that he is a creator. And if we're made in his image, I believe that we are made to build as well. We're made to create. And now for some people, it's already I think in there bubbling out. And for other people, you got to kind of dig it out. But I think it's in everybody. But the words are different when you look at the creation part. The Lord, God created, everything from nothing, and it's a different word, right? So he just basically created it. He said it, he spoke it. That was the vehicle, and it came to pass. With us, it's different. We're to create, but it's a different word. We're to bring the unseen into the seen. So everything has already been done. It's already been created, but we are to bring the unseen to the seen. Now, maybe you're thinking, well, what do you mean? A car was already created? No, but all the pieces of the car was already there.
Yeah.
And we had to bring it out of the ground and be able to do that. It's interesting because everything was already created and it's in the ground. So it all had to be mined. Even gold God put into the ground. Why did he put the gold in the ground? It had to be mined. It had to be dug out.
Yeah.
Now, you think about it. How did he create us?
From the ground.
From the ground, right? So I believe the reason he did that is because, we are to build. That's what he wants us to do. So it's super cool. And it doesn't matter whether it's like, you're building your business, which I think he wants us to be able to do that, but just building things, we're to build. We're to build, families and build relationships, and we're to build.
Yeah,
he made us that way.
Yeah.
So, that's how I look at it, and I get excited, and I'm thankful. I'm thankful that I have a father who's the master builder that I can learn from, right? That he made me in his image.
Yeah.
So when we get excited about building something, and being able to do that, well, we get excited because God put that innately in us. So that's a piece that, I'm very grateful for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that kind of led over to the whole, the magnet that you were talking about.
Yeah.
And the vibration.
Yeah.
So I really want to dig into that because I think there's a lot of gold there. And I figured bringing up the magnet would kind of spark some thoughts for you and what we talked about this morning.
Yeah. So that's an interesting piece. It's a little weird where people could be like, and trust me, it's not, a lot of times what happens is you have these, I don't know if I would call them religions, but you have these like religions or sectors where people get focused on this.
Right.
And then what happens is in Christianity, if you start talking about it, a lot of times people are like, they associate with it. So, you're going to, you know what I mean? And they do that.
Yeah.
But I think they miss the point. The point is, the difference between the two is God created the piece, or he created a workflow, he created a model or a template or a principle that applies. And the thing about God is God's not a respecter of persons. So the principles that God created work. So whether you're a believer or not a believer, if you're using the principle is going to work because he created it.
Yeah.
Whereas some people will look at the principle as the Almighty, whereas a Christian, we don't. We look at the one who created the principle.
Right.
That's the difference between what, us and them, or us, for the most part, in that part. But it's principles that he created. Now, where it gets, really interesting that I really try to geek out on as well is the vibrational piece and there's everything operates in energy and there's power and there's truth to all of that. You know what I mean? And it's just super interesting. And the part that you talked about, where the woman came who had a flow of blood when Jesus was walking to go, heal Jairus' kid, she touched him, but she said it to herself. She purposed in her heart that, hey, if I touch him, I'll be healed. And power left him immediately, and she was healed. Now, when he says, who touched me, I believe that he already knew who touched. He just a lot of times was saying things to teach a lesson during that moment. But there's truth to that power left him. And I think, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, I think God has called us as believers to walk in power, but I think most believers do not walk in power. I think most believers just settle and live in comfort, and there's no power in comfort. And things shouldn't be about us, it should be about other people. So being able to learn and tap in and jump into power, I think that's what we're called to do. And I'm going to give you an example, if you don't mind me.
No,
I'm going to share a story.
Please.
Okay, let me share a story. So years ago,
what it's about.
It's a story that I'll never forget. So years ago, my very first business, I had an appraisal business. And this was before like all the cool phones with the app and all that.
Yeah.
But way back in the day. And I remember you remember the PDAs? You may have been too young. I had a PDA. So basically like, it's kind of like a phone where I could go out during the inspection. I can like put everything down, click on. I would hook it up to my computer when I get back. It would load all the data and it would save me from manually loading the data. Right. So it was super cool. And I used to do that. And all of a sudden it just stopped working. Just totally stopped working. And, it wasn't cheap. They're probably $300 at the time. And, I was frustrated. A year later, I don't know what I was doing. I was probably driving. But for whatever reason, I thought about that. And I was like, oh, man, I wonder if, like, sometimes you have an outlet where the switch has to be turned on.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I was thinking to myself, I wonder if it was plugged in. I don't even know why I thought of it. I wonder if it was plugged into an outlet where the switch wasn't even turned on. What? So I remember getting home and I'm like looking all over the house for it. I find it. I didn't throw it away. Plug it into a thing, turn on the switch. I wait. Ding. An hour. And the lesson, here's the lesson I learned. Two things. One, as a Christian, if you don't have power in your life, maybe you're either not plugged in or maybe you are plugged in, but the switch isn't on. You know what I mean? The switch has to be on. You got to be plugged in, got to be plugged into the Spirit, but the switch has to be on. And there is some truth to the power that we're walking in. And it's not just a word, it's actual power. And everything, there's a vibration to everything. And I just believe that the higher a person can vibrate on a consistent basis, I think the more power that person's going to be able to have. I haven't figured all that part out yet, but that's just kind of what I see and what I read and what I believe. So,
yeah, I mean, it got us talking too about even in business where, you know, and Alex Ramosi had talked about this, this point of, as a business owner, you go through these long periods of time of just like grinding, putting in, day out. Mm-hmm. But then there's a couple times where you hit the home run. And he shared this story of these two guys that had this business. They were struggling to make payroll, struggling to just make ends meet. And then Q1 the following year, they hit a home run, 15 mil, 20 mil, 17 mil, like month after month. And then they decided, hey, we can start going on vacations. We can start doing all these things, buy the house. And his recommendation to them was, now is not the time to let up, but now is the time to put on the gas. And I think so many times, like, it goes back to comfortability, where we get so comfortable with, man, we're good. Like, I'm good with what I have. But God hasn't called us to stop. Like, if we're living and we're breathing, we're called to continue building, like you've talked about. And I think it's just so powerful to, like, think about how when you're in those moments and you are in those quote unquote vibrations, you got to press the gas.
Yeah.
And not let up.
Yeah. I love that story when you were telling me about, because I haven't heard that before. But I appreciate it and I believe in it. You know, it's interesting because I got a couple pieces on this. One, I think a lot of times, even in us in the church, right? And when I say the church, the body, the entire body, I think a lot of times there can be this stigma, especially for business owners or whatever the case, where you're like, oh, it's all about money, right? Or it's all about money. Or if you got a business where you're making millions of dollars, you know, it could be like a bad thing, like, oh, you're selfish. I'm not a believer in that at all. I think that we're called to multiply everything that hand touches, right? 100%. And ultimately, you can be, you know, a great human being and be rich, and you can be a crappy human being and being poor. It's a posture of who you are in your heart, right? Having money is money's just a tool. So money's going to magnify who you already are. But with that being said, I want to share a story. It's probably the most powerful story that I've ever witnessed, and not only witnessed, but I got to experience it. And it's something that I constantly think about. Probably a week doesn't go by where it doesn't pop up. But I remember one time I was at a men's retreat, and we were, there's probably about 80 people in the room. And it was weird because we're in this, this room, like I don't know what the name of it is. It was a big park, and then there's like this room, and it was a pretty cool room. But the way it sat, you had people sitting this way, people sitting that way. The speaker was over there, a couple rows this way. So I was sitting here watching the speaker, but this way, there was a pastor who brought like 30 of his people from another state. And the preacher, the guy that was speaking, is a very wealthy man. He's a businessman. He was bringing up, talking about money and finances. And I could see that the preacher was getting very offended. No one else is paying any attention, but the way I'm sitting, I'm right in front of him. So I'm watching him get offended, but I'm also listening because I love this guy and I love everything that he says, right? So finally, about probably halfway through, he stood up. I'm like, oh, it's going to get real. And he basically says, hey, I have a problem with all of this. So I'm like, everyone's like, what's going on? But I knew this was going to happen. And he basically said it, the speaker said, what's the problem? And he said, I got a problem because I make 60 grand a year. He goes, all you're talking about is money. He goes, I make 60 grand a year and that's enough for me. And I'll never forget the words out of the speaker's mouth was, that's your problem. It's all about you. Mm. And he sat down and he kept going. And this wasn't a thing where it was like a name it, claim it. That's not what it was about. But the gentleman was very wealthy and he was going through some principles from the Bible. At the very end, the preacher stood back up again and he says, I want to apologize in front of everyone. I never looked at it that way.
Wow.
And I don't know how many people there actually remember it. For me, it stayed with me because, again, money is a tool. But I think of so many of us, especially Christians, we get to the point where we think it's enough for us. And if we have a thought process of it's enough for us, then truthfully, it's just really selfish.
Wow.
Because it's not about us. It's not supposed to be about us. If we built everything we built for strictly me and my wife, then what's the point? Yeah. Now, my wife and I will be benefactors, obviously, of what we built. But if that's your goal, if that's the main thing, then there's no power in that.
Yeah.
So
we unpacked so much this morning. So, but kind of, I want to backtrack a little bit too about the same story with the woman touching Jesus' dress.
Yep.
He was on his way to heal
Jairus' kid.
Yeah, Jairus' kid. So the importance of having a good circle around you.
Ooh.
Because what did he do when he got there?
Yeah.
And I think we unpacked this a little bit too. I had this little story from this book that I'm reading. And he was talking about how one what are they? Glidestales?
Oh,
the horses.
Glidestales.
Yeah. One by itself can pull 8,000 pounds. Two that haven't been brought up together can pull 24,000 pounds. But then if you bring two together that have grown up on a farm and have worked together, can pull 36,000 pounds. So you go from one pulling 8,000 pounds to being able to have 36,000 pounds pulled with two that have constantly worked together and built that relationship together. And it just reminded me also how important your circle is, who you surround yourself with, who's speaking into your life. And I think it's just such a powerful thing because even when you look at that story of Jesus, he kicked people out.
It's such a great story. I know for me, I missed that for many years. And I would say that if there was probably 10 people right now listening, probably 9 of them have missed that. And if you read the story, when he walked into the house, the girl already died. So everyone was wailing, of course. Imagine, losing your kid. But he said, she's sleeping. Now, at that moment, the Bible says that they ridiculed him. So I want you to understand, for one, actually before that, he only brought 3 of his disciples in. So he left other ones out. Why? I don't know. Maybe belief. Only brought 3 in. Then they ridiculed him. And when they ridiculed him, he kicked them all out of the house. He had to put them out of the house. And then he went and healed. And it's just interesting because, maybe with the negativity and the bad energy and the whole 9 yards, the unbelief, there's no miracle there. So he had literally removed that. So he had a space where miracles can happen. And I wonder in our life, so many times where maybe we really want that miracle to happen, but maybe there's not a space for that miracle to be able to take place because of unbelief or because of who's in that circle. So it's super, super important. It drilling down and whatever it is you're trying to accomplish. If it seems like it's dragging or it's tearing, maybe ask yourself, hey, who's in the circle? Who do I need to clean house with to make sure I have a space and an environment for the miracle to actually happen? So it's a great point. It's a great story. It's just super awesome. And if the Lord didn't do the miracle until his space was cleared, what makes us think a miracle is going to happen if our space isn't cleared?
Yeah, I think it kind of related back to the whole vibration thing of there's some people that could be bringing that down.
Yes.
And it's hard for you to flow and let the Holy Spirit lead and do things when you just have constant negativity or constant people pulling you down or not having faith in you, or not even faith in you, but just having faith in what you're doing and that you are being called to do that. Right. So, I mean, if you're trying to build, and then you have all these people in unbelief and not believing in you, it's tough. And, that brings me to the point of, I did remember Rudy. You were talking about Rudy this morning. So I want you to touch on that a little bit, because it kind of goes hand in hand with this a little bit.
Yeah. So we all have our favorite movies. Rudy's one of my favorite. But you have a guy who's in high school who's short, not very talented, not very fast, had great heart, played hard. His grades were horrible. And all of a sudden, one day, the light bulb went off and he wanted to go play at Notre Dame. Now, Notre Dame is one of the top colleges in the country. So you're dealing with a D1 level where you're dealing with Rudy, who is a JC at best. It's 100%. It's like 9-day. So in reality, it's just not going to happen ever in any lifetime. But he purposed in his heart that this is where he was going to go to school. And it's weird because for me, it was like, okay, the light went on. His vibration 100% changed. So whatever the frequency he was in school was not the frequency he was when he was going after it. And now he's going after it, and people are like, even your own parents don't believe in you, like telling you all this stuff. And he was just like, he didn't want to hear it. He didn't listen. He's like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. He did it. He did it. He did it. He kept getting rejected. And ultimately, the rest is history. He was able to get in. He was able to make it on the team, and he was able to get on the field. And he, to this day, was the last person, 2025 right now, he was the last person that's ever been carried off the field at Notre Dame Stadium.
Wow.
So it's just amazing. He was able to accomplish that. Now there's a movie about him because in my opinion, in my belief, that he not only purposed in his heart, but he changed, he changed he changed his whole thought process. He changed his vibration. You can imagine the difference in the, here's what I think of it. I think of it like this. Like, have you been on an airplane before?
Yeah.
Okay. Have you ever been on a commercial airplane?
Yes.
Okay. So like there's really 3 types of planes, right? So you have a commercial that's here. So below that, you kind of have the Cessnas. Have you ever been on the Cessnas?
No.
Okay. And then you have the Cessnas here. Then you got the commercials that kind of fly here. I think they're like 37,000 feet.
Okay. Like in the air.
In the air. And then above that, you have a private jet. Have you ever been on a private jet?
No.
Okay. Super cool. I've been able to do that, but they fly at a higher level. So you have 3 planes, right, that all fly at different levels. And there's a reason they do that, obviously, in that space. But you don't think, men and women operate at different levels of frequency? You know what I mean? So it's just interesting. It's interesting. Like, and I'm sure that, there's things that change that, right? What are you focusing on? What are you doing? What are you believing? Jesus said, if you believe, if you truly believe, you can say to the mountain, be cast into the sea, or to the tree, be uprooted. Like, and you just think about that. Like, how can that be? Like sometimes we pray for something so small and it doesn't even happen. And the Lord says, if you believe, that would happen.
Yeah.
We're like, what? You know what I mean? So I just think that like, obviously there's something to it, and being able to operate in that type of a space where you're plugged in and the switch is on. So there's power going through, not so much for us, but so we can go out and empower and impact the people that are around us.
Yeah. There's a couple things that come to my mind, and then we can kind of wrap this up. But first thing is Rudy, right? Like, a lot of people didn't believe in him. And I think a lot of times as business owners, it can be pretty lonely. Like, you have people not believing in you. You're the leader, so everything falls on you. You're having to deal with everything. And obviously we lean on the Lord and things like that. But I'm just curious on your take as far as like how to manage that as a business owner, as a leader, anybody leading a team, because leadership in general can feel lonely, right? So just curious your take on kind of how to manage maybe somebody that's feeling lonely in leadership or a business owner? Like, what is your take on that?
Yeah, actually, it's a really good question, right? I would kind of break it down. I would say, I always say, you remember why you're doing it. So it all starts with the why. So why are you doing it? So as an example, if you're building a business to fill in the blank, you got to remember why you're doing it, because there's going to be times where you feel like you're alone. You feel like quitting. You feel like throwing in the towel. You're like, why am I working all these hours? Why, I'm running out of money. I'm doing all of this stuff. You got to remember the why, right? So I think when you truly do that, and if you need help, write it down, print it out, and put it all over the house, right? So that way you see
Coach
it.
Martin.
Contact Coach Martin. Put somebody around you that can pour that into you. But it's great to have reminders of why you're doing it. So as long as you can remember why. Now, here's a little caveat. So if your why's not big enough, then once the tough times come, you're going to quit.
Yeah.
So you want to have a big why. But if you have a big why, then it's more than just you. If it's only about you and I, it's going to be so much easier to quit when the things get tough.
Yeah.
But if I'm doing it because of fill in the blank, or if I'm doing it because my wife and I truly want to impact everyone that we come around, or as many people as we can, if I truly believe that, you know what I mean? If I want to be the guy where, we're at a restaurant and, the waitress is sad and I find out that she can't even make rent. She's a single mother. You know what I mean? And we want to be the people that can like, hey, what if we paid your rent for the year?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Not because of us, because he told us to do this for you.
Yeah.
Like if I truly believe in that on my heart, it's going to be easier to get through those hard times.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because then it's no longer about us. It's about others. And I think, Dillon, ultimately, it's all about others. Like even if you look at it from a marriage standpoint, it's not about me in a marriage. It's not even about my wife in a marriage. Yeah. It's about us teaming up to impact and influence, God's people.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think it's so powerful to have a why. I think that's what every business owner needs to have, because if you don't have a why, you're going to just quit. You're going to give up. And I think as you're building teams, carrying that why over to your team and everyone driving the same mission is so important. I know we were kind of talking a little bit about that this morning too, of like creating a mission statement, a vision statement, core values, because as the team gets bigger, it is easier to lose sight of what the ultimate vision and the goal is from what you originally started it for. So I think having everyone moving in the same direction towards the same goal is so important. And that's something we're really working on in the salon right now is, hey, let's get a mission statement together. Let's get a vision statement together, get our core values together. So everyone's working towards the same goal in the same mission and towards the same why, because at the end of the day, it's all going to impact God's kingdom.
Yep.
So last little gold nugget that I want to just touch on that we talked about today. It's literally about gold. I know that we have talked about this before of during the gold rush, the miners were not the ones that made a majority of the money. Mm-hmm. Most miners went bankrupt. Most miners lost everything. But the people that actually did really well were the ones selling the stuff to the miners, selling the shovels, selling the equipment. And I know that kind of spoke to you a little bit and you dove in on that a little bit. I don't know if you remember exactly what you dove in on, but I think that's something that's always stuck with me. And I don't even remember where I heard it, but it was just something that popped out to me. And I felt like it did a little bit to you as well. And if you have anything to share on that.
Yeah, I would say that, and I don't even know if I talked about this earlier, but this is how I would see it. Because there's 100% truth to that, right? When you look at the people that were providing the tools for the people that were digging, they actually did better. There was fewer of them and they did better. But I think, in my opinion, I think the reason that is, so think about the principle behind it. The principle behind it is the people that were digging, they were digging, for the most part, they were going and digging for themselves. Now, I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with what they were doing in a sense. Some of them could have been doing it for other reasons. But the people that were providing tools, they were providing value to the people that were fill in the blank. Because it doesn't matter if you're digging or whatever, they were providing value to the people. And the way God has a principle that he set up is profit always follows value. So if you focus on value, and a lot of new entrepreneurs get this wrong.
Yeah.
A lot of people get this wrong. They focus on money.
Yep.
They focus on the money. They focus on the money. They focus on the money. It's a wrong principle. It's a wrong principle. You focus on value. You be a value provider, right? And then ultimately profit follows value. So I think they tapped into a principle that God created, and therefore they were able to capitalize on it.
Yeah. The gold miners were the get rich quick, and the ones selling the equipment were the ones coming out consistently, selling, putting in the work. And I think it just goes to show, like, as a business owner, this isn't going to happen overnight. Like, you have to put in the work. Nothing's going to happen overnight. And I think even like with Sportsbox, right? Like sometimes you'll have business owners that will come in and like expect something overnight. And it's like, no, you have to put in the work. And I think so much in life, people are like that, where they're just like, I just want it now. And it's like, Chick-fil-A has been around 78 years. So it's like, it's been years. Subway's been around 40 something years. This doesn't happen overnight. If you want a big, successful business that's driving God's kingdom forward, it's not going to happen overnight.
I agree, Dillon. I do. I think a lot of times, I'm going to just go as a Christian, business owner,
Yeah.
or a Christian man or woman that's looking to earn income. I'm going to be talking more to you.
Yeah.
But I think what happens is we don't truly understand how it works. So, we see people that have something nice. We're like, dang, it'd be really nice to be able to have that. But we don't understand the foundational piece behind it, where you have to be built up as an individual first. So while you're building your business and you're doing all those things and you're going through ups and downs, you're being prepared. So you're being prepared as you do it. You know what I mean? And if without that preparation, you're never going to be able to accomplish what you're trying to accomplish. So there's kind of like two sides of the coin. There's a side of the coin where, working works, where we see it working. But the other side of the coin is more valuable. The work, you may not see it working for you, but it's working on you. And that's way, way, way more valuable. And a lot of times because we don't see this side of the coin, we give up. Well, this side of the coin is really, I don't want to say irrelevant, but it's not as important. The developmental piece on our end is a sustainable piece. And that's what God develops us during that process. So that way, when we're ready, we're able to earn it and keep it. Yeah. Otherwise, you're going to be like a person that wins a lotto and they're bankrupt in 5 years. Yeah. And I would kind of end it this way on that. If God didn't want you to go through the process, which he 100% did, he put the gold in the ground, in the garden. So the gold was in the garden, in the ground. Why didn't he put the gold on the very top? There was no economy. There was no stores. He put it in the ground. So even then, he did it for a reason, because we have to go through the process to get straightened. If you and I go to the gym because we're like, we want to get big arms for the summer, like you don't lighten the load. You got to, rack it up, and it's going to hurt. But what happens is the process that God created works even in the gym. So while we're doing it, our arms will grow and we'll get stronger. Business is no different.
Yeah, man, what a fantastic conversation. I just appreciate these talks that we have, and I'm going to try and start bringing what we talk, working together into this podcast. Now people know where to find me, but as a new co-host and being on the show, where can people find and learn more about you and what you're doing, and just so that they can connect with us and really get to know us?
Yeah, I appreciate it. Now, you can go to my website, go to kingdom10x.com,
okay,
or kingdom10xcoach.com. Find out a little bit more about who I am, what I do. And if you got questions, or if you're struggling in an area, reach out. We'd love to be able to help you. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, well, until next week, and our next conversation and next topic that we just talk about in the office, we will see you guys.
See ya.
See you later.